Hi, this is Scott Garibay, and today we're going to talk about Dungeons & Dragons, and we are going to talk Dungeons & Dragons 5th edition, and we are going to talk about the sage advice errata comet that has struck. Boom! Right? And it has sent all the pieces everywhere, and every commentator, every tabletop, and that's what I love about Dungeons & Dragons, right? Dungeons & Dragons Dungeons & Dragons sneezes, the tabletop role-playing game community gets whirled. The tabletop Dungeons & Dragons sneezes, every other tabletop role-playing game in the world catches a cold, right? Like, that's the way it goes down. It's just like, and everybody's talking about this. Your regular Dungeons & Dragons 5th edition commentators and people who are way outside the Dungeons & Dragons 5th edition community are talking about this because D&D 5e matters. It's the game. It carries the entire industry, right? And one of the things I love seeing is, like, get this, right? So if you're a Dungeons & Dragons game, right, and if you're Dungeons & Dragons 5th edition, your errata gets more coverage than major releases of other games, right? That's one of the things I love about this. All right, so let's talk about this in depth. This thing, this is huge. This is a really big deal because essentially something's really fundamentally changed here, right? So sage advice errata. So let's talk about what it is and what's happened. And what I want to talk about today is relationships with a brand. Okay, so every dungeon master, every 5th edition dungeon masters, every 5th edition dungeon player's relationship with the brand of Dungeons & Dragons. Let's get into it. All right, okay. So what happened here? So basically the sage errata, there's a ton of errata, but what really people care about is every player character and some monsters, every single player playable race is now having alignment removed from it. Okay, it's not even, alignment is no longer attached to any race, any playable race, right? That's a big deal. That's a big deal. Like, that's big, right? Now, do I agree or disagree with that? I totally agree with that. I have no problem with alignment being removed from playable races, and the reason why is it's really not needed because it already says in the dungeon in the player's handbook, everybody plays heroes. You have to be in the neutral to the good bracket. Is it important to me that, a race is lawful neutral rather than chaotic neutral? Not in the least, right? It does matter to me that we're not there yet. Nothing that's been printed says that any playable race can start as non-hero. That can start as a villain, as evil, right? So one, what I want is preserved. However, I'm very disappointed with. I don't like this. I don't like this at all. I'm with the vast majority of commentators saying, and I've heard no one likes this. Nobody. I haven't heard a single commentator say, "Oh yeah, I'm really glad these are great," right? And so I don't have any issue with them taking alignment off of player characters because there's already a blanket statement that every player character needs to be neutral or good, right? I very much care that player characters never are allowed to be evil. And the reason why is I fundamentally care about Gary Gygax's legacy, right? And that's a huge part of his legacy. Is like, we play heroes. The moment Dungeons & Dragons is for running evil characters, that fundamentally changes what Gary put forward, right? The other issue is, so we're not there yet. So why am I disappointed with this, right? Well, it's not stopping there. They're talking about gnolls. They're talking about beholders. They're talking about mind flayers, right? All being, there's a lot of talk, and you can see the direction of this. They've been trying to remove alignment from the game. I've called this for 2 years, right? Like, I've been saying this is going to happen, right? There are certain things that Wizards of the Coast is coming for. They're coming for faith-based heroes, right? Clerics, paladins, right? And which are clearly alignment aligned, right? And have been from the beginning, right? In addition to that, they're coming for alignment because it just doesn't fit their worldview. It doesn't fit Wizards of the Coast's worldview, right? So I'm very disappointed. I don't want to say I'm angry. I'm not angry. I'm not angry. I'm just disappointed. But I'm very disappointed. This is terrible. And the reason why is we're moving toward a world where there's no evil alignment on any monsters. That's what I do care about. And also, this makes it easier for us to get to a point where people are role-playing player characters that are evil. Now, of course, you have, page 4 of the Dungeon Master Guide on Dungeons & Dragons 5th Edition says the rules aren't in charge, you are, right? So, of course, a DM has the ability to override and say, I'm going to allow, evil characters. But what is a concern is when Dungeons & Dragons accepts evil characters, they're saying Gary accepts evil characters, because now Dungeons & Dragons, Dungeons & Dragons 5th Edition, right? The current edition of Dungeons & Dragons Forever is Gary's. He's the creator. His name is on every book, right? And I'll tell you right now, if there's ever a day where Gary Gygax's name is not on every single book, we're gonna start a different conversation, right? But that's not today, right? Like, the reality is, no game in the world carries Gary Gygax's legacy further, better, stronger, faster than Dungeons & Dragons 5th Edition, right? Basically, Matt Mercer serves as Gary's squire today, right? And so does Amanda Heyman, and so does Ray Winninger, right? They're just Gary's squire. That's all they're doing. They're just pushing Gary's name higher as Dungeons & Dragons grows, right? And the minute that some other game is larger than Dungeons & Dragons, or that, the minute that happens, right, then, Wizards of the Coast has failed Gary. But they have not failed Gary. They've massively, massively succeeded at making the legacy of Gary Gygax bigger than it ever was, right? Gary has more impact today than he was when he was alive. No two ways about it. By a long shot, right? All right, so I'm disappointed. I'm upset, right? This is terrible, right? This is a horrible, horrible decision on Wizards of the Coast. And so now, how do I respond, right? Well, here's the issue. Because I take Dungeons & Dragons very seriously, right, have a relationship with Dungeons & Dragons, the product, right? Dungeons & Dragons, the brand. It's both, okay? And I'm just going to say brand going forward, okay? And just so you're aware, Dungeons & Dragons is bigger than Wizards of the Coast. It always will be. It's bigger than Hasbro, right? Hasbro could sweep away into the ocean, right? Dungeons & Dragons going to outlast it. It's bigger, and I'm very convinced of that, right? And right now, as it stands, I think there'll be a buyer for Dungeons & Dragons for the next 200 years, right? It's a huge name brand. It's marinated in Americana. People love it, and it's important, and it very genuinely is a very strong, is an incredibly strong brand. Now, I have a relationship with that brand. You're like, wait, Scott, you got a relationship with a brand? Well, first of all, don't worry when people say things that shock you or alarm you. Worry when people don't know what they're actually doing. You have a relationship with a brand. I'm betting, right? So let's talk about brands that people have relationships with. There's lots of them, okay? First of all, Apple. Apple is it's famous for people having a relationship with that band. They like going to the Genius Bar. They like having the hottest, new, most expensive, cool phone, right? I'm a Samsung. I'm an Android guy. I'm a Samsung guy. I've never owned an iPhone in my entire life, right? And I have to admit, I was poor at one point. When I came up out of college, I had nothing, right? I had very, very little, right? And I didn't have an iPhone kind of money, right? And even back then, I got used to using brands that were open and really weren't aimed at the wealth class, and I take pride in that today. I use the common person's tool, right? Android, open, free, I love it. I have, Android is me, right? And for a lot of people, iPhone is them. It is very, very important to them, right? Just, it's a real thing, okay? So I just want you to be aware of that. So the other thing is Starbucks. A lot of people have, very much associated with the brand of Starbucks. It's a daily thing. They go to it all the time. They like Starbucks for lots of reasons. I'm a Starbucks person. I love Starbucks. You'll never hear me complain about a $5 cup of coffee. Worth every penny, right? I love Starbucks. It's fantastic. There are lots of brands. NFL is a life brand for a lot of people, right? They identify with their team. When the team wins, they feel like they won, right? And they're not wrong. As a fan, They put up money. They buy jerseys. All that turns into players. All that turns into victory, right? They're not wrong. They're part of it, right? Just like the Skeletons with David S. Pumpkins, right? And so, part of it, right? And here's another one. Like, come on, Harley Davidson. I love this story. It's one of my favorite stories ever. There's a guy in church. I knew this guy about 10 years ago. He was with a group, and they all did. They all rode Harley Davidsons, and then they allowed in some dudes on some what they call crotch rockets, right? And they came in with a Suzuki and a Kawasaki, and they were letting them ride with them, right? Well, my friend, he was like, he looked at the Harley brand, and then he looked at Kawasaki. He's like, hey, I like the Harley style. I'm going to get a Kawasaki because for $18,000, I can get a much, much, much better bike than a $26,000. This is 10 years ago, right? Than a $26,000 Harley, right? And he looked at all the numbers, right? 3 months later, I kid you not, right? He was riding with his buddies. He ended up selling that $18,000 bike at a loss for half, and had to rebuy a new brand new $26,000 Harley because he caught someone literally laughing. He caught two of the guys coming out of the diner, on their road, laughing at his bike, right? Harley is a brand, right? And so I have a relationship with Dungeons & Dragons. That relationship was started in 1982, and I'm going to tell you right now, you will put me in the grave before I stop buying every single edition of Dungeons & Dragons. There will never be a printed Dungeons & Dragons edition I don't buy while I'm alive, ever, right? I am down, right? Now, I know there's a lot of people out there like, Dungeons & Dragons do something I didn't like. And here's your choice. It's ride or die. Like, now, virtually, not literally, right? Okay. Yeah. So, just like they said in the classic rap song, ride or die, it's ride or die for me. I'm in. I'm all in. Virtually, no real death here. All right. And that's the issue. Like, WotC did something I hate. I don't like this, right? I think it's going in the wrong direction. Actually, they haven't even done anything I don't like yet, right? But I can see the direction this is going, and this is paving a road. This is paving a road to somewhere I do not want to be. I am very upset with Wizards of the Coast, right? So I got a choice, right? I say, okay, I don't like this, right? But now I need to make sure that my relationship, do I take my ball and go home? And I'll tell you right now, there are a lot of people who are saying, I'm taking my ball and going home, right? And I think there are going to be some people on this sage advice that are going to stop buying 5th edition products. Now, what I think actually is happening, there's a lot of people who were not already buying 5th edition products and are going, I wasn't, and they're saying, I'm going to stop buying 5th edition products. You weren't buying 5th edition products already. What's it matter? Like, but I think there's genuinely some people who are going to not buy 5th edition products based on this, right? They're taking their ball and they're going home. And they're going to go find a non-Dungeons & Dragons game to play, right? I ain't like that, right? Like, if I have a relationship, I stay in that relationship and I can do everything I can to preserve it, right? A relationship I care about. And I very much care about my relationship with Dungeons & Dragons 5th edition. I very legitimately care, right? And I'll tell you right now, I ain't going to do it. I ain't going to sit back and just say, oh, that's it, I'm out, right? I don't do that with I don't do that with my friends. I don't do that with my, So, you could take a look. I definitely have breaks with friends, but I actually just reunited with somebody that I had a big grudge with for 4 years, right? And I will take extensive efforts to maintain relationships. It's the same thing here. And I will warn you right now, you set a pattern where someone does something you don't like, you write them off, and you take your ball and go home, that ain't going to work well for you in life. It really ain't, right? And so the reality is, I will watch, right, if they completely remove alignment. If they ever here's the triggers for me. If they ever allow evil player characters in the book, they say, hey, do it up. Here's direction on how to play an evil character. I think that's a complete betrayal of what Gary stood for, right? If they ever take his name off the books, right, these are triggers for me, right? If they ever, because we have to monitor relationships, and if we're in a relationship and they're like, hey, I'm monitoring this relationship, and and I'm going to do. You have to monitor relationships for like essentially abuse, right? You don't want to be in an abusive relationship. I think if there's ever a point where there's complete rejection of what Gary really put forward, right, then you got to think, hey, is this the place where I want to put my time, energy, and love, right? Like, and that, and I love to play Dungeons and Dragons. That's what I mean by love, right? I really love it. I love it. It's the number 4 thing in my life, right? Husband. Christian husband, father, that's the first 3. After that is Dungeons and Dragons, man. Like, it's really important to me. So the reality is, what I want to tell you is, I hate what they did, right? But I'm not taking my ball and going home. And what I want to encourage you is, if you want to follow, if you want to be allied with the right people, ally with people who don't take the ball and go home after a bump in the road, right? Ally with people who are ride or die, virtually, right? Ally with people who are there and stick it through thick and thin, all right? And that's for all your relationships, right? Your romantic relationships, your friendship, your beloved relationships, your friendship relationships, your romantic relationships. Invest, commit, no plan B, right? And that means vulnerability, right? Like, you can get hurt in this. But if you're like, oh, take my ball and go home, right? You're more likely to have bad friendship, bad endings to your friendships, divorces, right? You're likely to abandon products. You're like, oh, I'm taking my ball and going home. And you know what you're going to find out? It ain't greener in other pastures. It very much is not greener in other pastures, right? You're going to end up in places where they're doing a major release, right? They're doing like 2E on the book, and it doesn't even get a 1/10 of the coverage that the errata for Dungeons and Dragons gets, right? And you're listening to the complete scrub commentators, because the real commentators are on the real game, right? They're on the real thing, right? So don't go where there's a trickle. Go where there's a white rapid, right? Stay on it. That's my opinion. I'd love to hear your thoughts. Let me know in the comments below. Please consider liking and subscribing. Have a wonderful millennium.